bringing it forward, and well done, and this is a good piece of legislation.
Nikki Kay.
Mr Speaker, I'm pleased to speak on the Hutt City Council graffiti removal bill. I want to start by acknowledging the Chair of our Select Committee, Nikki Wagner, other members, but also to acknowledge the local member, Trevor Mallard, for bringing this bill to the House. It's not often that we have a collaborative approach on some of these matters, and just on this local bill we've had a very, very collaborative approach. And I think at the heart of this bill are a couple of basic principles, actually some principles which are very close to the National Party's heart: safer communities, but also private property rights. So I just want to talk a little bit about that, but also acknowledge from Chris Farfoy, Labour member of the House's speech, that many of us have been victims of graffiti, so we personally know what that is like to have your property damaged. Some of us, or a lot of us, have been involved in campaigns, so we have mastered the art of removing moustaches and various other things from hoardings with a bit of mess and a rag. And it's a very small example of how it feels to have your property damaged, but I think there are many members in this House that know what it feels like to have that lack of respect and have your property damaged. And I think that's the other point that I would make, is that we can in this House pass legislation that may try and rectify some of these issues, but underneath it we must always remember as well that the basic principles, and we know from some of the statistics that a lot more young people are involved in graffiti, but that basic principle of teaching people respect and the value of other people's property is not necessarily something that will come from legislation. It comes from families, it comes from communities. But I think that this bill will help in a couple of ways. The first thing is, if we are able to remove that graffiti in a timely manner in the Hutt area, then what that says is to some of those young people who do it for a particular status, that we're not going to tolerate it. And it means that these communities, we also know that if it does hang around, that graffiti, that it's more likely that there will be other graffiti and that communities will be less safe. So I think it does help in being able to make safer communities and reducing crime. What has been great about this collaborative process in the Select Committee is we have seen some very valuable amendments, and I want to touch on them. So one of the amendments is around the definition, and I think it was Holly Walker from the Green Party who helped provide that very clear definition. The other amendment that I was very keen on was the removal and the deletion of Clause 8. This originally was in the bill, and we have spent a reasonable amount of time on this, and it provided the Council protection from civil proceedings arising out of actions that it may have had, even with reasonable care. And I think members really felt that this protection was not needed, and that council employees should not be given greater protection than other local authority employees. And I think that's a really important point, because the whole way through this bill, our discussion was, how do we ensure that we can get rid of this graffiti in a timely manner? I think it costs $300,000 to $500,000 without this legislation for the Hutt Valley Council to be able to get the required consents to be able to remove that graffiti. But how do we also protect basic private property rights? And I think that we saw that Clause 8 as unnecessary because it did mean that local authority employees would have greater protections over other local authority employees. I think the other main point that I would make is that, as I said before, this legislation can do so much, and whilst we may have done some great things to tighten up some of the clauses, there is a need that some of the young people that are engaging in graffiti are doing that for various social reasons. So, we on this side of the House are supporting programs like Youth Guarantee to make sure that they are engaged in education and work and aren't necessarily out there vandalising people's private property. But I'm not going to spend too much longer. I just want to say that I do commend the local member, I think I've said that twice now, Trevor Mallard, for bringing this bill to the House. And I do want to say that I think all members of the Local Government and Environment Select Committee have engaged in a very collaborative process to deliver what is a very important bill for the Hutt their community, which involves making sure that our communities are safer, which also protects some basic private property rights. And I think that the previous member who has spoken is probably right. There will be communities around New Zealand that will be looking at this local bill and saying that they might be a little bit jealous. But I think overall it's been a very, very productive, worthwhile process, and I want to commend this bill to the House. Thank you.
I understand the member is taking just a 5-minute call, so I'll ring the bell at 4 minutes.